is Sky Sports.
This week on NHRA Today. When Dallas was all done, it was a thriller of a championship. Forrest finds the fours and his record 11th. Kurt claims number 3 to clinch number 2. And Bob serves up his top 10 from Texas. From SuperFlow Corporation in Colorado Springs, Colorado, these stories and more on this edition of NHRA Today. During the 3.5-year history of NHRA Today, we have visited a lot of race shops and seen a lot of dynamometers. Sportsman racers on up to the elite of pro stock rely on these test machines to search for those minute gains in horsepower that make the difference between winning and losing. We've even seen the impressive sight of a 5,000 horsepower nitro engine at full throttle while strapped to a dyno. But while everyone in drag racing worships at these horsepower alders, do you understand how a dyno determines those numbers that provide bragging rights and win lights? Now, you know I love drag racing, but just once, I'd like to see them race to the top of that cloud-shrouded mountain they call Pikes Peak. Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Evans, and welcome to this edition of NHRA Today. Realizing as we do how important engine dynamometers and, for that matter, state-of-the-art flow benches are to improving racing technology, we thought let's find out what makes them tick. And no better place than SuperFlow here in Colorado. We'll do that in the next half hour. Plus, we'll have highlights of the Chief Auto Parts Nationals from last weekend in Dallas. You know, it's a little nippy here at 6,100 feet, about 40 degrees, so let's heat things up with What's Hot.
Late news from Larry Minor Motorsports that Ed the Ace McCulloch is being dropped as driver of the McDonald's Top Fuel Dragster after next week's Winston Finals in Pomona. Just last weekend in Dallas, McCulloch joined the Elite Slick 50 300-mile-an-hour club by running a record 301.70 during night qualifying. Now, here's Steve with more hot stuff.
John Forrest got a Texas-sized piece of revenge on the funny car field during qualifying when he lowered his own national record with his first pass in the 4-second zone.
Edgels did it first. Our hats to him, but we were able to do it and back it up, so we're really excited. But credit goes to this team. Coyle and Bernie, Frazier, they did a great job. I love them a lot.
As if one Coletta wasn't hard enough on the competition this year, Scott qualifying number 1 8 times, running 308 miles an hour. Next year, there'll be 2 Colettas. The Bounty Hunters coming back. Connie, it'll be terrific to have you back.
Yes, we're really looking forward to next year. We think we're going to have an awesome group together.
How serious is this effort?
It's very serious. There's another race car rig that is being completed right now, and Tim Richards comes as the crew chief for my car after the World Finals.
Going to run the whole season?
Whole season. We're going to do it in style, I hope.
And that's What's Hot. I can't think of anyone more qualified to describe the principles of a dynamometer than Neil Williams, the founder and president of SuperFlow. It basically starts with a big water pump, Neil.
Yes, that's true. On an engine to measure the horsepower using a dynamometer, you mount a device that's rather like a water pump on the back. And then the engine shaft spins in the pump and converts the engine power into hot water. We also measure the reaction torque on the pump to determine the torque of the engine and its speed.
And there's other measurements being taken at the same time.
Yes, that's true. We control the throttle so that we can run at part throttle. We measure the fuel flow into the carburetor. We measure the airflow into the carburetor. And then we also measure the exhaust gas temperature on each cylinder to determine if one cylinder is weaker than another.
Well, this past weekend in Dallas, it was time for the true test, the racetrack and pro stock. Here's Dave's report.
The Chief Auto Parts Nationals showed why Pro Stock provides NHRA's closest competition, with names like Bob and Rusty Glidden, Mark Powick, and Ricky Smith failing to qualify. Stealing the thunder from those drivers and qualifying 16th was little-known Chuck Ekmalian.
I know that was an accomplishment, but in this camp here, it was an accomplishment we felt we could do all along.
But the task ahead was even tougher, as Chuck's first-round opponent was number 1 qualifier Warren Johnson.
Warren's not a baby. He's the best. In this racing, it all takes a little bit of tire shake, and the movie can be rewritten.
But we've all seen this script before. After identical 5-0s at the light, the Professor's GM Performance Parts Cutlass in the far lane powered into round 2, ending Chuck's day.
Well, we'll keep on fighting at it, and one day, we'll get someplace.
Newly crowned Winston champ Warren Johnson made short work of Gary Brown and Gordy Rivera, while on the other side of the eliminations ladder, WJ's son, Kurt, met up with Bruce Allen at the wheel of the Super Shop Chevy Lumina in the Final Four.
In the near lane, Kurt's Texas Harley Oldsmobile stayed in the groove and steadily powered past Bruce and into the 4th father-son final of the year. In that situation, what's a mother and a wife to do? Arlene saw Kurt cut the quicker light in the near lane, and despite Warren's quicker elapsed time, the whole shot held up, and Kurt claimed his 3rd win of his rookie year.
I'm trying to get 20 years of experience in 18 races. It's hard.
It was son topping father in the race, but it's father over son in the points, as Kurt clinches 2nd in the Winston standings. Scott Jeffrey on Larry Morgan and Bob Glidden round out the top 5.
When you have a SuperFlow dyno, you don't have to go to the drag strip to test. We're on a run, right, Tom?
That's right, Steve. What we're doing is a simulated drag race run here with 4 gear changes in it. We're just going through 4th gear now. We can look at our RPM, our horsepower numbers. Just went through the lights.
Now, how many runs would you make to get all your accurate data?
Steve, I'd make it 3.
Really, just for consistency purposes?
Right, so
Let's
you
do
can get an
another
average. Sure.
I like this. This is great. You can almost feel the G-forces.
That's about the only thing you're missing.
Now, you really want as few variables as possible in this
That's
one.
right. You want to keep almost consistently from run to run.
Okay, well, the best test of 5,000 horsepower is the all-concrete track in Dallas, Texas. Here's Dave McClellan's Top Fuel Report.
The Chief Auto Parts Nationals was a Texas-style homecoming for top fuel stars Eddie Hill and Kenny Bernstein, but Oklahoman Jimmy Nix crossed the Red River and made off with the #1 qualifying prize.
It just seems like things have been coming together a little bit better than at the first year. We had some engine problems, but I think we've been pretty fortunate lately.
In an all-4-second field, Jimmy drew number 16 qualifier Mike Dunn in round 1.
He beat me at Topeka in June. I think I red-lighted. There's a fine line between too early and too late.
But in the far lane, Jimmy crossed that line once again. And while the La Victoria Salsa dragster advanced, Nix was stunned and done for the day.
I guess I tried too hard. I guess. I don't know.
Winston points leader Eddie Hill controlled his own destiny at Dallas. A Final Four appearance or a loss by second-place Scott Coletta would wrap up the title. Round 1 featured the Texas twosome, but Bernstein's quick draw overcame the Benzoyl Nuclear Bananas quicker elapsed time, and Hill had to wait on his fate.
Kenny's win over Eddie Hill in the first round was followed by a victory over the Castrol Syntec machine driven by Pat Austin in round number 2. That set up a Final Four meeting between the Bud King and Mike Dunn.
Mike got the jump in the near lane, and the Bernstein barrage came a little late as Dunn advanced to his 4th final of the year. As Eddie Hill looked on from the tower, he hoped Scott Coletta's championship campaign would be done in before departing Dallas. Mike's best reaction time of the day held off the Coletta American International Airways charge as Dunn did the deed for himself and for Hill.
I'm glad for Eddie. He's been tough all year. That Pennzoil car, the whole group over there with Fuzzy Carter and them, they did a hell of a job, But this La Victoria, Kendall McGuire's Top Fueler, it ain't bad either.
So many people. There's no way anybody can ever know how many people pitched in to make this happen and for how long.
So Eddie's the king of the hill for 1993. Scott Coletta and Kenny Bernstein will decide second at Pomona, while Mike Dunn and Rance McDaniel round out the top 5.
Dynos are becoming more and more computerized. Witness the latest unit from SuperFlow here. It is actually smart. It can make decisions based on functions that it monitors. Great looking unit, pretty high tech.
Yes, it is, Steve. Right now we've got a couple of race teams. Robert Yates of the NASCAR field has got one of them right now that he's using.
Now, when you train a new dyno technician, what are some of the things you really stress?
Watching the oil and water temperature. You can lose up to 5% of your horsepower if you have too hot or too cold of oil temperature.
Better hot than cold?
Usually, yes. People go usually too low.
What about exhaust in the atmosphere in the dyno cell?
You have to be sure you're getting good clean air into the engine, otherwise you won't get good horsepower numbers.
Castrol presents the GTX Pipeline, the latest news from the world of drag racing.
Well, the field is finally set for next week's Budweiser Top Fuel Classic. And the bump spot belongs to Mike Dunn by a mere 10 points over Jim Head. Mike's La Victoria Salsa machine will have a first-round Pomona pairing with Scott Coletta. Other matchups will find Eddie Hill versus Joe Amato. Ed McCullough squares up against Corey McClanathan, and Kenny Bernstein faces Rance McDaniel. To the winner, $50,000. Welcome back to SuperFlow. You know, about 75% of the dyno testing racers do is to evaluate cylinder head and manifold combinations. And those are created using a flow bench. Just what is it, Neil? How does it work?
Well, flow bench is used to measure the airflow resistance of engine intake parts. And to do this, we mount the cylinder head on a simulated cylinder, and then we open the valve to various valve lifts and measure the airflow resistance. To do this, we look at the test pressure, at always the same test pressure, and then we measure what the flow is. So we can turn it on and make a measurement.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, folks, even at a fairly low setting, it does flow some air. And we've got to keep this show flowing right along. Here is Bob Fry with the Sportsman Report.
Ever since David Letterman started it, it seems like everybody's coming up with a top 10 list. But we've never been one to follow the crowd, never stooped that low, never been one to be a Letterman copycat. Until now. So here are my top 10 reasons why it was great to be at Dallas for the Chief Auto Parts Nationals. Number 10. I finally got to meet the Emmons boys and determine who is going to win the Winston Championship.
I'm going to win the Winston Championship, Bob.
I'm going to win the championship.
I'm going to win the Winston World Championship.
I'm going around here.
No,
You got me. Or I get my ticket to California.
Number 9. I finally got to go to a sporting event without a single tomahawk chop. Number 8. I saw first a 1964 Corvette in Supergas with a 514 cubic inch Ford engine.
Had the Ford motor, come across a good deal on the chassis. It's all I had, so I had to use it.
Do you think if Jimmy had a Pratt & Whitney lying around, he'd be running a jet car now? Number 7. I got to watch a rocket scientist at work and didn't have to go to Houston or Cape Canaveral. Well, speaking of rockets, you don't suppose this is the cow that jumped over the moon, do you? Sorry, I just couldn't pass that one up. Number 6, I met a super comp racer whose sister is on President Clinton's cabinet.
My sister is Dr. Jocelyn Elders. She's the Surgeon General of the United States.
Number 5, I fell in love with the pit crew. You're rapidly becoming one of the more popular cars here with the fans this weekend.
Yeah, it's kind of a crowded pit, as you can see.
Number 4, saw a comp car run 690s, and it wasn't a dragster.
We knew the car had it. We let it fly on the first pass. We wanted to make a good hit and get in the field.
Number 3, with all these people here, I didn't run into one person named Buttafuoco. Number 2, got to watch the battle in top alcohol dragster where drivers and crew members alike were on pins and needles in this battle to see who wins the Winston Championship. The Conways are so laid back, you'd think they were at the Wiener Dog Winter Nationals. Only kidding, Katie. And the number 1 reason why it was great to be at the Texas Motorplex? Rap is a driver's name and not the kind of music they played on the PA. And speaking of Jeff, let's take a look at the winners from the Chief Auto Parts Nationals. For NHRA Today, I'm Bob. Maybe we'll do stupid pet tricks next week. Fry.
I'm amazed how many performance companies we visit and find the impact of Warren Johnson. And Neil, here we have it again in this combination filter and fuel pump.
Yes, this pump and filter combination was designed by Warren Johnson for professional drag racing. And the purpose is to deliver fuel at 28 psi to the carburetor even when accelerating at 5 Gs. We make each one of these fuel pumps on a CNC machine, and then each one is tested by computer. So we'll turn on the flow bench for a test.
Okay, and I think up on the video monitor, yep, there it comes. There is the flow and the pressure. Right now, let's go from a high-tech pump to a high-tech valve spring in this week's Fast Fact with Frank Hawley.
Today's alcohol dragsters and alcohol funny cars are running just about as fast as the top fuel dragsters and fuel funny cars did a few years ago. Some of the reasons? Well, they have bigger and better superchargers to force that air into the engine. They have bigger and better cylinder heads to get that air in and out of the cylinder. And also, they're flat revving them higher. Some of the alcohol dragsters are revving their engines close to 10,000 RPM as they cross the finish line. Well, that kind of RPM is really hard on parts, especially the valve train. And one of the items in the valve train components that really gets beat up are the valve springs. Now the racers will spend $300 or $400 for a set of these springs, and they'll only last 1 or 2 runs on an alcohol dragster or alcohol funny car. That's not too good. Some of the drivers have changed and are running titanium valve springs. Because the spring's a lot lighter, it opens and closes the valve much, much easier, and they get a lot more life out of the springs. I'm told as many as 10 runs. Well, that's the good news. The bad news is that the titanium springs cost about $1,700 a set.
Used to be you just hooked up a good electric fuel pump and that was it. But Neil, now you need a whole fuel delivery system. We just saw part of it.
Yes, that's true. You need a high-pressure pump, you need streamlined flow fittings, and you need a pressure regulator that's designed to maintain the pressure as the flow goes up.
You're also bleeding off fuel with this unit.
Yes, you use a bypass regulator system so that their air bubbles are eliminated from the system.
And now, Red Wing Shoes wants to take a moment to tell you who's hot in the world of drag racing. Blaine Johnson's in the midst of a hard-fought quest for a 3rd Winston Top Alcohol Dragster Championship. And when he blew his best engine during qualifying, along to the rescue came Daryl Hitchman.
He was gracious enough to loan us to us, and you know, we had a chance to win the championship down these last couple races, and he figured, you know, if we could do it, he'd give us the parts, and if he needed it, he would still let us have it.
Ironically, Blaine and Daryl met in the first round of eliminations.
All we did is shake the tires, and he ended up winning the round. My prediction was a Hitchman motor would win the round, and it did.
Our congratulations to Daryl Hitchman. And be sure to watch next week when Red Wing Shoes will once again tell you who's hot in the world of drag racing. We're going to wrap our SuperFlow story with some amazing new technology. It's called Engine Cycle Analysis. Paul Pazanauskas helped develop it. What is it?
This is a system that allows you to measure cylinder pressure of each individual cylinder. The way it does that is you install a cylinder pressure transducer in the cylinder and measure the pressure each degree. That allows you to optimize spark timing, air-fuel ratio, and cam timing for individual cylinders instead of the entire engine like you would when using a dynamometer.
It's kind of like seeing inside.
Yes, it is, Steve.
Well, that's incredible. And so, too, were the funny cars last weekend in Dallas.
At the Chief Auto Parts Nationals, all but one of the Chief Funny Car competitors were out-qualified by Dale Poldy's first ever 5-0 run.
We're pretty happy with it. We wanted to run a 5-0 at Gainesville at the first of the year, and then we didn't get to run the car hardly at all, and so we're happy. Car runs 6 times a year. It's kind of hard to stay competitive like this.
Dale credited his solid number to the Motorplex's all-concrete quarter mile, owned by ex-racer Billy Meyer.
He set the pace for the new racetracks to come, what it should be like, and the facility's just great to race on.
In round 1, Dale's Pisano flopper met up with the Harry's Hot Rod Cutlass of Jerry Caminito. Jerry broke the beams first in the far lane, but at 1,000 feet, a puff of smoke from Caminito propelled Poldy into a second round meeting with the Moon Eyes Dodge of Kenji Okazaki. But this time, Poldy lost his handle on the Motorplex, crossed the center line, and took out a timing cone as Kenji cruised into the final 4.
Okazaki was then defeated by the first 4-second funny car driven by Chuck Etchells. And for the second race in a row, that set up a final round confrontation between the world's 2 quickest funny cars, John Force and Chuck Etchells.
It was Castrol versus Kendall in a Lone Star State Oil Company war. John Force, the roughneck in the near lane, got loose at half track, but he stayed in it and powered his way to an NHRA Pro record-tying 11th win of the year.
Dallas only comes once, maybe in a lifetime, you know, and I gotta have this win. This race was like Indy to me. It's hard to explain why. Just things are important, and after the crash last year, this race is important, and we did it, and that's all that matters.
Force goes for the all-time record next week at Pomona, while Etchells and Cruz Pedregon fight it out for second. Al Hoffman and Tom Hoover round out the top 5.
Well, I'm pleased to see the little Chevy survived all the abuse we heaped upon it earlier, but I'm sure it still will be glad to see us leave, and leave we must. But we'll be back next weekend live from Pomona, California at the times you see on your screen. Qualifying action on Saturday, highlights of eliminations, and final round coverage live on Sunday. I'm Steve Evans. For all of us here at NHRA Today, join us then.
NHRA Today is a presentation of Diamond B Sports.